We'll be back on air at the same time next Monday with a progress report. But for now, to join our petition, call 0171 222 7999. That's 0171 222 7999. Or you can write to the Liberal Democrats, 4 Cowley Street, London, SW1P 3NB.
That was a party political broadcast by the Liberal Democrats.
You're watching Central. It's now 10:05.
From ITN, News at 10 with Trevor McDonald.
Row grows as Churchill family lands a lottery windfall. Veterans win final battle for a 2-minute silence. Nationwide alert for the fake £50 notes. And down by the seaside, beware the danger from above. Good evening. A political row is building up tonight about the first big payout from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. It went to members of the wartime leader Winston Churchill's family, who are getting nearly £13 million for his pre-1945 private papers. They're being secured for the nation. It's said that they could have been sold for twice as much abroad. But not everyone is pleased. Some MPs have expressed the view that the papers properly belong to the nation anyway. Our political correspondent Hugh Pym reports.
50 years after VE Day, and Sir Winston Churchill's private papers are saved and will stay in Britain. That's the government's justification for today's announcement, but the use of millions of pounds of lottery money to buy the drafts of the famous wartime speeches has drawn fierce criticism tonight.
Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.
The lottery has always intended to be divided between a number of different good causes, of which care for our heritage is one. And I think Sir Winston Churchill's papers it's hard to think of more important aspects of our heritage that have been created this century than that.
But some Labour MPs say the purchase of these papers hardly represents the government's finest hour. £12.5 million will go to Churchill's descendants, including the Conservative MP Winston Churchill. Should they really be paid so much, the critics ask, for what ought to be part of the National Archive anyway?
Well, I think it's an absolute outrage. There are poor people in my constituency who pay £1 a week and were told by the government that this money was going to the arts. They didn't know, and I didn't know, that the money was going in the pockets of Winston Churchill.
And under the eye of Sir Winston's statue, some MPs are demanding a common statement amidst renewed talk of Tory sleaze. They say the Churchill papers sale is an insult to those war veterans who struggle to make ends meet. Hugh Pym, News at 10, Westminster.
The Prime Minister threw his weight today behind the campaign for a 2-minute silence right across the country on VE Day, May the 8th. He said he hoped everyone who could would join in solemn remembrance of those who made victory possible 50 years ago. The silence wasn't built into the official arrangements for VE Day, but will now affect pubs, cinemas and TV schedules, even a championship-deciding football match. And it will be announced at railway stations. ITN's Paul Davis reports.
With the VE Day anniversary just a week and a half away and preparations already at an advanced stage, the Prime Minister's declared support for an official 2-minute silence is being viewed as another victory for the veterans. Shortly before meeting these pensioners in East London, Mr Major said he had the greatest sympathy with the British Legion campaign for an official silence. Such backing from Downing Street has delighted organisers of the VE Day celebrations.
The government can't force people to observe a 2-minute silence, but we would certainly encourage people to take the Royal British Legion's plea extremely seriously.
It's hoped the silence will be observed in the 2 minutes before the Queen lights the first beacon here in London's Hyde Park at 8:40 p.m. on Monday, May the 8th. The British Legion is hoping to recreate the atmosphere of bygone days, when work and play stopped and the nation ground to a halt on Remembrance Day.
As far as possible. I mean, there are impracticalities, we know. I mean, driving down a motorway, you just can't stop a car, but we would hope, and I don't think it's too much of a bother for the television, because they can still show pictures, but We would also hope that radio, local radio, national radio, would support us in ensuring that the 2-minute silence is observed.
Both ITV and BBC are making late changes to programme schedules to accommodate the silence. British Rail says its station staff will announce the start of the silence and then respect it themselves. The Odeon Cinema Group will try to rearrange its films so yesterday's real-life heroes can be honoured at the appointed time. And several major breweries will be politely asking drinkers to join in.
We'll call effectively time. Every pub has got its bell at which it calls time at 10:30 or 11 o'clock every evening, so we'll call time for the 2-minute silence.
It's a good idea. I wasn't around when obviously the war was on, but I feel if it wasn't for our ex-servicemen, etc., this wouldn't necessarily be here now.
The Premier League and Sky Television are even discussing moving the kick-off of the crucial Blackburn Rovers-Newcastle match so that the silence can coincide with half-time.
Police seized forged banknotes with a face value of more than £18 million today from a garage in East London. It's the largest amount ever found in Britain. Police say the forgeries are very good, almost impossible to detect. And it's anybody's guess how many of the fake notes are already in circulation. Vernon Mann has our report.
Inside the lock-up garage, police found boxes crammed with what appeared to be brand new £50 notes and American dollars. An estimated £12 million and $10 million, all of them expertly forged, about to be distributed around the country. The seizure follows a 2-year investigation. Police were waiting when a man turned up to open the lock-up. He was arrested. Detectives were delighted at the size of the haul.
It's a huge amount of money, and the impact of it being released into circulation is immense. And we've stopped that, and that's got to be good for everybody.
The garage lies behind a house undergoing renovation.
We see him lift up the garage, and there was all the money lying there. A terrible thing, isn't it? When you're right next to it.
The police here are talking of organised crime and say the forgeries are so good it's almost impossible to tell them from the real thing. And they say there could well be as much forged money again already in circulation. Detectives said the counterfeits will be difficult to detect, even under ultraviolet light. They have watermarks too. Significant though today's find is, it by no means marks a final victory in the ongoing battle against ever more sophisticated currency forgers. Vernon Mann, News at 10, East London.
The last time international war crimes trials were held in Europe, the Second World War had just come to an end. Today, a Bosnian Serb soldier, Dusko Tadic, appeared before a United Nations judge in The Hague, charged with the murder, rape and torture of Muslims and Croats. The fighting in his country is still going on and shows no sign of ending. Our Europe correspondent Jonathan Monroe reports from The Hague.
Moje ime je Duško Tadić.
He confirmed his identity and in doing so became the first defendant in a war crimes tribunal in Europe since the Nazis. The world had wanted Duško Tadić to answer charges of rape, genocide and crimes against humanity.
Mr. Tadić, are you ready to enter a plea to the indictment?
Nisam kriv,
not guilty, and I never took part in any of the crimes with which I'm charged.
But the prosecution claims Tadić did take part in atrocities at the Amarshka camp. Severe beatings were commonplace, says the indictment. Prisoners were raped, tortured and forced to mutilate each other under threat of death. ITN was shown evidence of beatings there. The UN believes Tadić inflicted similar injuries using rifle butts, poles and wooden batons. The prosecuting counsel said he planned to bring witnesses from Bosnia to the trial's full sessions, when detailed evidence will be heard, probably in the summer. That full hearing has the power to impose a life sentence. The official indictment against Tadić names 29 of his alleged victims, 21 of whom it's said he murdered. And it goes on to set out the prosecution's case that there are many other victims whose identities are still unknown. Tadić is now in custody in this prison block outside The Hague. Dozens of other suspected war criminals are still on the run. The next time Tadić leaves his cell, it may be for a face-to-face courtroom encounter with the surviving victims of his alleged crimes. Jonathan Monroe, News at 10 in The Hague.
Aid workers are warning that the horror that has engulfed Rwanda for the last year is set to continue and could even get worse. Thousands of Hutu refugees have been forced to leave their camps and are now making their way back to the homes they fled last year. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Michael Nicholson has been to Butare, where the British medical charity Operation Merlin is facing up to that horror, and where survival for many rests on the courage of a few.
Reg Kingston started his holiday today here in Rwanda. Last week he was an NHS surgeon in Old Trafford, Manchester, but today he's on duty in Butare Hospital. He'll have a lot to get used to, like the casualty ward in an outside lean-to, and the waiting room for every type and every age of casualty out on the lawns. He'll not be used to treating machete head wounds, or bullet and shrapnel wounds, mine amputees, or people deliberately set on fire in this cruelty of tribal hatred.
Sunday at 4:30, Merlin rang, and by 10 o'clock the following night I was on the plane here. But I couldn't have done that unless there had been agreement to let me go. This is my holiday, but you know, I don't mind that. It's obviously well worth it.
Within his first hour, he was operating on an 8-year-old girl with a bullet in her stomach. And there was so little light in the operating theatre, he was glad he'd brought with him his head torch, the one he'd used climbing in the Lake District last week. This afternoon, we followed a Merlin team to remote mountain villages on their daily visits as if they were GPs back home. This is Kikembe, not far from Kabeya, where so many were killed in this week's massacre. These are people returning to their homes for the first time in a year. They have suffered terribly. They have come to depend on these visits from the British doctors and nurses, not just for the medical care they bring with them, but because every visit gives these people the feeling that they are being protected.
Coming straight from England, and literally we came straight into this sort of we got off the plane and were in a car and straight down here, and we're one of the first agencies, medical agencies down here. It's very shocking and it's very distressing. People are in a very bad state.
Small teams then, often working in places where the larger organizations will not or cannot come to. Overall, and given what's happening in the rest of this country, it may look a small contribution. But whether you think it makes any difference or not, well, you just ask these people. And ask this little girl who had a bullet in her stomach and who was saved by Merlin's wizardry. Michael Nicholson, News at 10, Butare, Rwanda. Michael.
Still to come on News at 10 tonight, marriage breakup, new plans for mediation, and an end to the quickie divorce. The end of an era, fears for the game's future as rugby league faces its own revolution. And Hitchcock revisited, the seaside town being terrorized by a flying menace.
They're messy, they're noisy, and they're just a nuisance.
Listen carefully. You're about to hear something you won't hear very often. The Rover 600 series. Cars built this well are few and far between.
British Airways. We cover the world.
Wiggle it.
Nobody chose all 6 main winning numbers last week, so this Saturday's jackpot has rolled over to an estimated £17 million. It could be you.
If you suffer from the pain of indigestion and heartburn, try Remigel. As you chew, it forms a soothing liquid that gives fast, effective relief. So, for indigestion pain, Remigel is an ideal solution. Remigel. It's chewy, not chalky.
Oh, hello. Have you seen it? It's a new 3-in-1 exchange in Mart. Look, the motor section has thousands of cars with a price guide and buying advice too. The business section is packed with ideas and equipment and even tells you which mobile phone service is best for you. Very handy. And in home and leisure, there's everything from security systems to sun lounges. If you don't find what you're after, faster, I'll eat my hat.
Welcome back. A brake's been put on quickie divorces and the government proposals to be published tomorrow. Couples will have to wait at least a year. They'll also have to attend an interview with experts. The cooling-off period could save some marriages and some court costs. ITN's Kevin Dunn reports.
1 in 3 marriages in Britain now ends in divorce, the highest failure rate in Europe. 3/4 of them are so-called quickie divorces based on alleged adultery or unreasonable behaviour, accusations which often cause bitter recriminations. But Judith and Christopher Howell divorced amicably after going through mediation to resolve their differences, including a financial agreement and the contentious issue of access to 10-year-old Lawrence.
Mediation brought us together so that we can talk to each other without a third party being involved. And when that can happen, things can be sorted out very quickly.
Lawrence has come out of it, hopefully, not too badly. And I know that he's proud of the fact that we get on well. He tells a lot of people, you know, my mum and daddy are divorced, but they're the best of friends. He's very proud of us for that.
The aim of the reforms is to end the so-called quickie divorce and to take much of the bitterness out of marriage breakdown by guiding couples towards mediation rather than legal confrontation. At the moment, a couple can get a quickie divorce in 6 months on the grounds of adultery or unreasonable behaviour. If they've been living separately and agree, a divorce is granted after 2 years, but without agreement, they have to wait 5 years. Under the expected proposals, divorce will be possible after 1 year with or without mutual consent.
In essence, we would very much welcome a reform which started by looking at children's interests, also took account of the process that's going on between the couple, and simply introduced a system which serves to make matters better, not worse, as the present legal framework does.
Bye-bye, darling. Bye. See you tomorrow.
Not all marriages can end as reasonably as that of the Howells, and for many couples the divorce process may actually take longer. But it is hoped that changes will, for most, make the partings less painful. Kevin Dunn, News at 10, Central London.
With a week to go to local elections in England and Wales, the Prime Minister promised help today for what he called the concrete wastelands of inner-city council estates and tower blocks. He called them monuments to the failure of socialist planning. Opposition parties said Mr. Major himself should take some of the blame. Our political correspondent Adrian Britton reports.
The Prime Minister chose Hackney in East London to illustrate how a deprived inner-city area can be transformed by a government scheme with private funding. He was certainly not expecting a hostile reception from one resident, arguing that falling living standards have led to a rise in crime.
There's no employment anywhere for them. There's no homes for them to live in. From 16 to 18, they get no money. That's what we're here to look at. Well,
that's what we're here to look at, he replied, and denied a suggestion that his visit was a political gesture in the run-up to the local elections. John Major may claim to be the only Prime Minister to have grown up in a deprived area, but this is not the first time the Tories have suddenly focused their attention on the inner cities. During the Thatcher era, the then Environment Secretary, Michael Heseltine, wanted to be seen hands-on reshaping derelict Merseyside, government action following the Toxteth riots. Now, John Major says he'll work with any local authority, whatever their political colour, to rid urban Britain of concrete wastelands.
We have learned over the years of the mistakes that have been made. Now I think we've found a way, the only way that is going to work, of the public and private sectors working in partnership, levering in all the resources that can be.
Today, Labour responded by accusing John Major of creating some ghetto estates, like this one in Lambeth they say was built when he was the local housing chairman.
The government has to take its share of the blame, and in relation to the inner cities today, it's got to take the major share of the blame.
Tonight, however, the Conservatives said the blocks had been approved when Labour ran the council. As for the Liberal Democrats, the promises for the inner cities come too